IORG_. Or for those who don't have social media, we do have a WhatsApp community chat. So please see me or one of the organizers after the program if you wish to be added, inshallah. Before we get started with the program tonight, we would like to recite a few verses from the Holy Quran. Please help me welcome Sayyid Ali Rida Mekki, بعد الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. ثانية على حب الزهراء. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون. لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون. إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون. وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون. وسواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون. إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكرى وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم. إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
Thank you, Brother Ali. If we could give him another loud salawat. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. So without further ado, please help me welcome Sheikh Ali Nazzal to the stage. بعد الصلوات على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل
Thank you. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So yesterday we mentioned one of the characteristics of a pilgrim, and that characteristic is rooted in the traditions of the Imams. One who knows the right of the Imam. And we said one of the basic levels of understanding is that we know that this Imam was appointed by Allah, and that this Imam was purified through thee. And he, among the Imams, and Imam Hussein alayhi salam and the other Imams from the Ahlul Bayt are the doors to the mercy of Allah. They're the perfect exemplars of Islam. When I have that basic understanding, then I can say that I have fulfilled that right. The second characteristic that I'm going to talk about is that of ikhlas. And the reason why I mention this is because we're looking at ziyarah as an act of obedience. Ziyarah is sometimes, unfortunately, the attacks that are leveled against tashayyu' usually center on ziyarah, things that we are associated with ziyarah or associated with Imam Hussein alayhi salam. But it's far from that. When we look at ziyarah, we're looking at it as an act of obedience, an act of ibadah. And when we say that it's an act of ibadah, it means we have to automatically consider ikhlas. We have to have that ikhlas. And yesterday I talked about the attachment to Allah Azza wa Jal by the Imams. The Imams, the companions of the Imams in Karbala were attached to Allah Azza wa Jal. And our attachment to the Imams, our attachment to the Prophets, our attachment to the awliya and the shuhada has to be for the sake of being attached to Allah Azza wa Jal, because they are the divine guides. When I'm thinking about Islam, I'm thinking about the oneness of Allah Azza wa Jal. The most important principle is Tawheed. La ilaha illallah. It's the most important principle. إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. But the second most important question, and I think this is relevant to every divine religion, every revealed religion. After the question of the oneness of Allah Azza wa Jal, we're going to look for His guidance. It's a matter of guidance. When we think of Nabuwa and Imama, when we think of the Prophets and the role of the Prophets, we're thinking about divine guidance. So that once I recognize the oneness of Allah Azza wa Jal, I recognize the reality of Allah Azza wa Jal, for me as a human being on this earth, who's recognized that, the first question that I should ask, or one of the questions that I should ask, at the very least, is what does Allah Azza wa Jal want from me? Because Allah Azza wa Jal, I should also recognize that Allah Azza wa Jal Alim is knowledgeable. And that Allah Azza wa Jal is one who wills, Murid. And when I recognize those things, I have to start looking, what does He want from me? But Allah Azza wa Jal didn't reveal anything to me specifically. But He revealed His divine message, His message to the messengers and the prophets. And so when we think of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, we're thinking of him in that framework. And when we think of ziyarah, we're thinking of it as an act of obedience. We can always look for the reason behind that. Why is it an act of obedience? We can think of, right, just the simple fact, and this is what I'm going to propose today. The simple fact that Allah Azza wa Jal made it mustahab. The simple fact that Allah Azza wa Jal promised the zawar, the pilgrims, those who journey to the grave of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, rewards. It's in that simple, right, act, right? It's that simple fact that Allah Azza wa Jal made it mustahab that it's an act of obedience. There's no reason to go beyond that. We can go beyond that. We can start thinking about it. What are the philosophical underpinnings of that command? But that should suffice us for those who have wilayah, who already have that attachment to the Imams, who have already recognized their right. We have gone to their traditions and they've encouraged us to go to the ziyarah of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. So how do we understand ikhlas in Islam? How do we understand sincerity in Islam? What is it? So my objective today is to take one hadith going all the way back to Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam and understand and explain ikhlas and explain the importance of ikhlas and sincerity and pure intention in Islam through the words of the Imam. And this hadith is narrated through a chain of trustworthy narrators by Shaykh al-Qulayn in his book Al-Kafi. One of the companions of the Imam recites this verse. He says, Surah 67 verse 2, that He may try, that Allah Azza wa Jal may try you as to which of you is most virtuous in deeds. The Imam says, it does not mean one of you whose deeds are more numerous, but one who's more rightful in his conduct. And this rightness is nothing but the fear of Allah Azza wa Jal and the sincerity of intention, niyyah. Then he added, the Imam added, to persevere in an action until it becomes sincere is more difficult than performing the action itself. And sincerity, ikhlas, is that you should not desire anyone to praise you for it except Allah. And intention supersedes action. Listen, the Imam says, intention is action itself. So what are the core concepts in this hadith? What is the Imam telling us? The Imam is saying that the verse doesn't refer to the quality of deeds. Instead, it emphasizes the quality of one's intention. The focus of the Imam is on the sincerity and the rightness of one's conduct rather than the mere number of actions. It's me being a virtuous person. True virtue isn't counted by the number of prayers that I do or the number of fasts that I do. It boils down to that intention. So the Imam in the hadith characterized so we can say according to the Quran, the most virtuous in deeds are characterized by two traits. And we're going to focus on one of them today because it's the topic of my lecture. The fear of Allah Azza wa Jal and sincerity of intention. That's the focus. True virtue lies in these two things. And for the sake of this lecture, we're going to only focus on sincerity of intention. But I want you to think of what is the relationship, what is the connection between the fear of Allah Azza wa Jal and that sincerity of intention. So in very simple terms, sincerity, ikhlas, means doing that action for Allah Azza wa Jal, solely for Allah Azza wa Jal. Some of our ulama, they explain it further. They say there are levels of sincerity, there are levels of intention. Just imagine yourselves on the prayer mat, right? Right before you're going to pray, right, dhuhr or any other prayer. What is that intention? What is that resolve, right, that is internalized by you? So one of the levels and one of the basic levels is that I resolve to be obedient out of hope or fear. As we know it in the Quran, Allah Azza wa Jal says they call upon their Lord out of fear and hope. And sometimes I have that fear of the hereafter. I have that fear of the day of judgment, the day of resurrection. And that keeps me, that makes me want to obey Allah Azza wa Jal. But sometimes no. Sometimes I want to worship Allah Azza wa Jal out of hope, out of a desire for the reward that Allah Azza wa Jal promised the believers. And that determines my resolve. That determines my intention. But we can also resolve at a higher level. The ulama, they talk about a higher level. In fact, there are higher levels, but I'm only going to stop at this one. They say to resolve to be obedient. So I'm praying to be obedient out of gratitude and love. And refers to the famous hadith of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam that says that I worship Allah Azza wa Jal out of gratitude, out of love, not out of fear or hope, but out of gratitude. I've recognized the goodness of Allah Azza wa Jal, and I'm a grateful servant. And he says the service, the worship of those who worship Allah Azza wa Jal out of gratitude and love is the worship of the free. And that's a higher level of worship. But the idea that we see, what is the common denominator in all of these statements, is that I'm only doing something, I'm only going to pray, I'm only going to fast. Any act that I do, I'm going to do it for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. I'm doing it solely for Allah Azza wa Jal's pleasure. Whether it's born out of fear or hope, or at a higher level, out of that recognition of Allah Azza wa Jal's perfection and goodness, that I start to worship Him out of love. Other things that we can take from the hadith is that intention is not only essential to the action itself, but intention supersedes action. It's more important than action. And so it's like a lot of times the ulama, they make an analogy. The relationship between actions and intentions is like the relationship between the spirit and the body. But again, the focal point, the focus is on the intention. That's the heart. That's the motor that keeps everything going. So we know that worship has to be, right? So if it's solely for Allah Azza wa Jal, if that my intention is solely for Allah Azza wa Jal, I only desire what is with Allah Azza wa Jal, I only desire His pleasure, His reward, then our worship must be free of riyā. That's a very important concept. Who's heard the term riyā? Okay, so a few of you. Riyā is something that is important. If I have riyā, it's so important that if I'm praying with riyā, my worship is batil. It's not sound. I have to redo that prayer because it involved the riyā. What is riyā? Riyā is desiring, doing something, desiring praise from others. So for example, I'm praying to earn the respect or admiration of people or seeking a good reputation. Sometimes I remember when I was a small kid, I went and asked the sheikh and I said, "Sheikh, can I pray so my parents are happy with me?" And he said he said that's problematic. I didn't understand it at the time. But it's the idea that we should only do something for Allah Azza wa Jal. Any act that has any other motive other than Allah Azza wa Jal is problematic. And that's a core principle in the Quran. Our actions are free of anything other than Allah. And the Imam in Al-Kulayni, in Al-Kafi, narrates this hadith from the Imam: the pure heart is the one who meets his Lord, and in it there is none other than Him. There are no other preoccupations. There are no distractions. It's only Allah Azza wa Jal. So in another kind of insight that we find from the Imam, from the hadith that we read earlier, is to persist in an action until it is sincere is more challenging than performing the action itself. What does that mean? What is the Imam saying? Sometimes I perform an action. I pray, for example, Salat al-Layl. I woke up and I got the opportunity to pray Salat al-Layl. And I prayed it. I had no other motive, no other desire other than Allah Azza wa Jal. But then what happened? Then the next day came along and I told someone, "Hey, by the way, I prayed Salat al-Layl." Then it's that persistence. Or you can think of multiple examples. Fasting, right? I'm fasting, I'm doing it solely for Allah Azza wa Jal. And then I want to tell people that I'm fasting. Or I kind of want to allude to the fact that I'm fasting. It's these things that the Imam's referring to. It's that persistence, that continuity that's so hard to maintain. Or sometimes we gave sadaqah. Or sometimes we did something that's really good, but we just want people to know. We want people, right? We want to earn the pleasure of other people. We want to earn the praise of other people. We want that recognition. And that's a very important thing to think about. It's very concrete. It's a very concrete question that we can raise to ourselves. Am I doing this for Allah Azza wa Jal? Or am I doing this for other people? I'll give you an example. Sometimes, for example, you'll catch yourself, maybe you don't really pray on, awwal al-waqt, in the beginning of its prescribed time. But when you're with a group of people, you kind of realize, or you kind of catch yourself, right? You're the first one to do wudu. You're the first one to pray. You're not really thinking about it. It's not like it's not where you kind of even notice it. You just have to think about it. Why am I doing it in this case and not in another case? Truly, if people didn't hear about my actions or didn't see my actions, would I still be doing that? See, it doesn't have to be that riyah, having that other, right, motive other than Allah. It doesn't have to be, right? It doesn't have to be explicit. It doesn't have to be so evil. Sometimes we kind of think of, like, the classic or the stock example would be what? That I'm, okay, you know what? A teacher or, someone I really, really like is gonna come through the doors, so I'm gonna pretend to pray. But you have to really dig deep. You have to think, why am I actually doing these things? Am I doing it for Allah Azza wa Jal or for some other reason? So in a summary of just the hadith, if I want to summarize the hadith, we can say that true virtue is about the quality and sincerity of actions, not the number of actions. And then we can say that perseverance in achieving sincere intentions is key. It's important. It's something we have to think about. It's not something that if we do that action, then I can just kind of forget about it. It's maintaining that sincerity. And then we should also think about, and I told you guys to think about this, but we're not going to really stress it, is that intention and action should align with the fear of Allah Azza wa Jal. So hopefully that is sort of, now we've understood what it's meant by ikhlas, we've understood what's meant by riyā. I want to give you guys a concrete example, and illustrate it in the Ahlul Bayt. Who's read Surah Al-Insan? Hopefully we've all read Surah Al-Insan. Who's familiar with Surah Al-Insan? It's one of my favorite surahs. In that surah, there are a number of verses that are associated with the Ahlul Bayt. Salamun alayhim. In the 7th surah, it begins to talk about the Ahlul Bayt. They had fulfilled their vows and fear the day whose evil is widespread, and give food out of love for him to the poor, the orphan, and the captive. We are feeding you only for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. We seek neither reward nor thanks from you. We fear from our Lord a grim and excruciating day. Who's heard of the occasion of this revelation? Okay, good. Who's heard that there was a moment in the seerah of the Prophet where Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam and Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam fell ill. They became sick. And so the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, he told Sayyidah Fatima and Imam Ali alayhi salam, he told them to vow to fast for 3 consecutive days. And so they vowed to fast for 3 consecutive days if Imam Hassan alayhi salam and Imam Hussein alayhi salam recovered. And they recovered, so they fasted. And on the first day, an orphan comes to the door. And the meal that they had prepared, which was bread, they gave it to the beggar. They gave it to the person who knocked on their door. And then the next day they fasted. And again, someone knocked on their door or came to their door and they asked for something. And there was a captive. And the Ahlul Bayt, Ahlul Kisa, they gave, right, what they had prepared for that day. And on the 3rd day, what happened? And then an orphan came to the door. And they also gave him the meal that they had prepared. And what do the Ahlul Bayt, what do they say? They say, we are feeding you only for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. We seek neither reward nor thanks from you. We fear from our Lord a grim and excruciating day. That was the ikhlas of the Ahlul Bayt. But there's something very important that I kind of wanted to kind of highlight in in this surah, in this story? Is it that big of a deal just to hand out a piece of bread for the Quran to make reference to this? What was so great about giving a piece of bread to the orphan, the captive? What was so great about it? I mean, it's just a piece of bread. It's a very small action. When you think about it, it's not like as if, when you think of empires, when you think of history, when you think of the history of civilizations, you're thinking about battles, major things. This is just a small act. It's giving, right, just a bread, a simple bread to the orphan, the captive, or the beggar. What's so great about it? Why is it that the Quran emphasizes it? What I took from this is that even the smallest action with pure intention can be great. The greatness of their actions didn't lie in some great, magnificent act, but in the small action of giving away the bread that they had prepared for themselves. Giving it to, that generosity was not born out of that gratification, that self-gratification. It was born out of a love of Allah Azza wa Jal. It was given for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. It's that ikhlas of Imam Hussein alayhi salam and the Ahlul Bayt, right? It's that ikhlas which is praised in the verse, not the mere material fact of giving away your bread. Does that make sense? And it's here sometimes, a lot of times, especially during this Muharram, there are questions about, especially because of the things that are happening, the genocide that's happening in Palestine, that we tend to ask, can we compare Imam Hussein, right, to other things? And when you start thinking about who Imam Hussein alayhi salam is, what's his divine status? What is his ikhlas? It's not just simply material facts that we're comparing. It's as if these questions is simply evaporated. I'm reinforcing the idea that it's really about the inner dimension of actions. It's the ikhlas of the actions that carries weight. It's on that level that we should be evaluating different things, not simply on the material facts and the material effects and impact of any given action. So now that we know about this and we gave you guys a good illustration, how do we purify our intention? How do we purify our intention? In fact, I would say that it's one of the most difficult things to do. It's one of the most difficult requirements in practice. And sometimes we think that we've achieved it. We've achieved that sincerity of action. But our ulama, they give a very beautiful example. They say, imagine a man or a woman who has a pool. They have a pool in their house, and that pool is stagnant, right? The pool is stagnant. There's no disruption of the water. No one's actually swimming in that water. And so all of the dirt just simply falls to the bottom. So apparently that pool looks clean. The pool looks, right, clear. So I can kind of consider it, right, there's no dirt. I wouldn't even see the dirt because I'm standing from up, right, outside of the pool. The moment that I jump into that pool, what happens? The dirt comes up. And then I can realize that the pool is in fact dirty. And so sometimes we think that we have purity of intention, of action. We think that our actions are born out of eternity. We count ourselves among those who have pure intentions. But the moment I face any distress, the moment something is presented to me, the moment I'm given that opportunity, what happens? That dirt comes up. So it's something that we have to be very careful about. Some of our ulama even said it took me 20 years. One of our ulama famously said, it took me 25 years to actually achieve that state, that purity of intention. I'm only doing something for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. And so another way to tackle this problem is to think of what are some other things that might come, that might change, that might corrupt my intention. And I spoke about this on Thursday at Bint Jbel, right? The love of world, the love of this immediate world. And we have a clear, concrete example in the enemies of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, those who opposed Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Think about their motives, reflect on their motives. What were their preoccupations? It wasn't the love for Allah Azza wa Jalla. They didn't kill Imam Hussein alayhi salam out of love of Allah Azza wa Jalla. They killed them out of love of this world. They had a preoccupation and attachment to this world. That's what preoccupied their heart. That's what distracted their minds. Ibn Sa'ad, the one who led the army of the Umayyads, Ibn Sa'ad was anxious for what? For that governorship, for that leadership, for that position, that status, having control of Ray. And that's what corrupted him. That's what moved him. So now we have a very simple understanding, just a very simple understanding of ikhlas. We have a concrete example in the actions of the Ahlul Bayt. We have a concrete example of the enemies of the Ahlul Bayt. We're able to kind of sort of compare and contrast. And I wanted to kind of emphasize something that our ulama one of our scholars has written about the true followers of the Imam. He's specifically talking about Imam al-Mahdi, but you can take that and extract it and apply it to our situation as well. And yesterday we talked about the recognition of the Imam as being a condition of ziyarah, the acceptance of ziyarah. A lot of times someone might ask, how do I have that? What is the condition for ikhlas? How do I get ikhlas? And I would answer with the same, kind of in the same line, that recognition of Allah Azza wa Jal. I can only have that true ikhlas if it's right. I know Allah Azza wa Jal. I know Allah Azza wa Jal to be the infinite source of everything that exists. And I understand that I have no independence. I understand, I've recognized the beauty and the goodness of Allah Azza wa Jal. That intention has to come with ma'rifah. In the same way that you might not necessarily want to achieve shahada or want to achieve Jannah because we haven't really understood Jannah. We don't have a recognition of Jannah. But if we all had that recognition, would any rational person choose this world over Jannah? What I'm trying to say here is that ikhlas, that doing something out of love for Allah Azza wa Jal, doing something only for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal, could only be born out of what? Out of ma'rifah. It could only come from ma'rifah, and that true ma'rifah of Allah Azza wa Jal. And when I understand that, and then I understand what? Then the second component comes in, where I understand who Imam Hussein was. That he was that door to Allah Azza wa Jal. He was that door to that divine guidance. We talked about Hadith al-Thaqalain yesterday. We talked about many of the virtues and distinctions and merits of the Ahlul Bayt. All of them come back to one simple idea, that these members of this holy family, they were what? They were doors to Allah Azza wa Jal. And in that sense, right, when we make that journey to even that physical journey to Imam Hussein alayhi salam, what does it represent? It's that journey to Allah Azza wa Jal. It's that journey to the mercy of Allah Azza wa Jal. It's that journey to the intercession that Allah Azza wa Jal promised His selected, right, ibad. That's what it represents. But it's very important when we make that journey and we start that journey to Imam Hussein, to the grave of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, my only motive is Allah Azza wa Jal. It's as if I see nothing else other than Allah Azza wa Jal. And anyone who's made that journey has kind of sort of can appreciate what I'm saying, or has maybe even experienced what I'm saying. Every single step is sort of imbued in that worship, kind of in the worship of Allah Azza wa Jal. Everyone's praying Salat al-Jama'ah, everyone's being generous, these acts of generosity, all for the love of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And that love of Imam Hussein alayhi salam is only for the sake of being attached to Allah Azza wa Jal. Because we know Allah Azza wa Jal's pleasure lies in the Ahlul Bayt, following the Ahlul Bayt. Obey Allah Azza wa Jal and obey the Messenger and those invested in authority. It's recognizing that, right? So that's what I wanted to kind of present to you today. And I want to say that what's so important about this inner dimension of actions is that now that we don't have the opportunity to be among the Zuwar walking to Imam Hussein alayhi salam, when we think about the importance of intention, we can be with the Zuwar if our intentions are set right. There's a hadith that says they don't have the opportunity, but they're with us in intention. And so if we had that intention, imagine having that intention. I wanted to go to Karbala. I wanted to go to Arbaeen. for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. But maybe because of circumstances or because of certain things, I didn't get the opportunity to. But it's through that ziyarah. Yesterday we talked about doing ziyarah at a distance, but now we're thinking about the inner dimensions of ziyarah. And we're thinking about that intention that can be internalized in every one of us. And so when Monday comes, even though we're not with the zawar, we can be there in intention. And that's what I wanted to say today. Walhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina wa Nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala ahli baytihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin.
Ahsan, Sheikh, if we can give it another last salawat. اللهم صل على محمد وآل Muhammad. So our sponsorship program is still going on for every night. If you would like to sponsor a night for one of your deceased loved ones, whether it be the actual sponsorship or the suites, just come to one of the organizers after the event so we can write down the name and take it into account, inshallah. We're about to begin the majlis. So please help me present Brother Ali Jamal to the stand. Ba'da salat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Thank you. Thank you. صلى على محمد وآل محمد. ثانية أنا بحب الزهراء صلى على محمد وآل محمد. محمد. ثالثة لتعجيل فرج مولانا صاحب العصر والزمان صلى على محمد وآل محمد. Again, a reminder every time before we enter into the majlis supporting the movement of the Imam, if we can do sincere istighfar, that will help with tears flowing. And even if you can't shed tears, they say put your head down, show any type of grief in the majlis of the Ahlul Bayt, specifically Abu Abdullah. And inshallah, we're able to use these majlis and these tears to turn into action, not just for the sake of tears. That those tears, inshallah, will lead to action and change and reform within our own selves. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله. صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله. صلى الله عليكم يا أهل بيت النبوة وموضع الرسالة ومختلف الملائكة. May Allah's peace and blessings be upon you, our beloved Holy Prophet, and the Ahlul Bayt. It was in your homes that Allah blessed us with guidance and revelation, and upon you descend the angels day in and day out. Ya